Hello, I'm Paul Wells. This is chapter 7 of the story of Plug and Plink. As usual, links down in the description to the previous chapters. So this chapter is going to be about manufacturing, and the relationship with the product designer had gone fairly well. The initial plan was it would all be in milestones, the time scale was there. Early milestones were just to kind of suss out the idea, followed by actually producing some CAD, and then eventually producing some 3D prints from the CAD, and then finally doing some stages, because it's all very well to make one prototype, but that in itself isn't what's needed. You need something which you can actually hand over to a manufacturer. And getting to that stage was actually taking a little bit too long. Each set of 3D prints was costing £800, £1,000 because they were high quality prints and printed in resin plus printed in flexible materials. The product design company were outsourcing that bit, so probably a bit of markup on it as well. Each time the prints were produced, so that the higher quality 3D print you want, the slower the printing process. So these things were taking, maybe a day or so once you'd actually joined the queue. Then they went over to the product designer, then they came over to me, and then I'd put the parts together and try it out and see if I'd got something useful, find something wrong, say, hey, this could be better, this could be thicker. But the aim was to get to at least one working prototype that I could at least use in photography for marketing material, that I could also leave on the piano and check that it didn't bounce around too much. So I was starting to get a little bit frustrated, really, that I couldn't actually get past this stage. So I figured it was probably best to try and sort of call it a day with the product developer. But I did ask, can you recommend any manufacturers? I need to start this next phase. And they gave me 3 recommendations. Well, the first of these was a company up in the north of the UK. And I had a very nice conversation with a guy there. He clearly knew his stuff. He asked me all sorts of questions about the bill of materials and the exact shape of things. Were they actually ready to be put into a mass production process? But unfortunately, that guy retired a few days after my conversation with him. I carried on talking to that company, but I quickly realized that really all of my questions were just getting passed over to another manufacturer over in China. So that just added a lot of delay to the whole process of figuring out what was possible and what it was going to cost. I also hit this issue of minimum order quantity, different parts from different suppliers impose different minimum order quantities. So it might be 300 from one and 1,000 from another. So I could see it was going to be quite a process to actually not end up with a lot of spare bits as well. So I looked at the second option. The second option was a gentleman in China, came very highly recommended. Had some good conversations with him and found that he wasn't really a manufacturer, he was more a broker. He could find people that could make different bits, but he wasn't actually a maker himself. He didn't own any sort of a factory himself. And I felt that, yes, this is a bit risky. It's risky for a few reasons. Firstly, if he's just going to get all of the parts made from different people, how do we know they're all going to fit together? What do we do if we find that parts don't fit? But more importantly, he was based in China. And you have to bear in mind that this is somebody who I'm going to hand over £12,000, £15,000 to get the plastic injection molding tools made, and then they will stay in China. I won't see them. And then once they're working, he'll want money for stock, he'll want money for materials for the first batch. And these are quite substantial amounts of money. I could do it, but I could only do it once. I couldn't afford to have something happen and need to go back and repeat the process. I wouldn't have the funds to do that. So on that basis, I figured it was just that little bit too risky. The next option, the third option, was actually really quite appealing to me. So there was a company in China set up by a British man, and it was a very strange arrangement. So what he said was, I have a factory. If you'd like to come over here, you can stay here for 2, 3, 4 weeks, as long as it takes, and you can actually supervise the process. You can see the parts as they arrive. You can try to assemble it yourself. You can get a feel for how is best to assemble it. And then once you're happy that the process is running, you can leave. I kind of liked this because it would solve the disjointedness problem. I would see immediately as parts came in if they wouldn't fit. And I've got enough of a sort of practical feel to be able to input myself and say, I think we can solve this way. And I was seriously considering that, but I still had this nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I'm dealing with a Chinese company. I'm on thin ice. Who knows what can happen? I don't have any reason to suspect there's any problem. I just know that if something does go wrong, it'll be very, very difficult for me to resolve it. So I didn't take any of those three options, and I thought, look, surely there must be a UK company. I know this is going to cost me a little bit more, but if I can find a company in the UK and they can handle the manufacturing for me, I don't mind if it costs a bit more. I don't mind even if it costs quite a bit more money, because it's actually a lower quantity and it's in the UK. So I started looking around again, and it reminded me a lot of trying to find a product designer in the UK. A lot of people didn't return calls. So I think I contacted 8 companies. 6 of them I just couldn't get any answer out of. And I'm not saying that I sent them my CAD files and I sent them my bill of materials, plus all these various documents that I'd written describing what the product is and how it could be assembled. No, the conversation didn't even get that far. They didn't know anything about my background. I remember talking to one company, and I think after 4 or 5 phone calls, I said, look, okay, I'll leave yet another message for Mr. Smith to call me back, but I think if he doesn't call me back today, I'm giving up. Eventually, one company were a little bit more friendly. I had found some of the companies actually, the problem was that they were actually largely design companies who had access to some manufacturing, and fundamentally what they wanted to do was go back and rework the design, because that's the bit they were comfortable with. And I didn't think that was necessary. The last thing I wanted to do was go through that entire process again. So I really wanted them to pick up the design as it was and then take it into manufacturing. Then a sort of chain of recommendations started. One company said, we're busy at the moment, try this company. That company said, sorry, it's not quite what we do, but we have handed other work like this to another company. And I think this happened about 3 or 4 times, till eventually one company said, we'd like to do it, but could you change the design? Some of these flexible plastic parts don't really fit with our skill set, and I definitely wasn't going to do that. So they said, actually, we do know somebody who deals with manufacturing of flexible parts. We've had lots of dealings with this guy for decades. Would you like to talk to him? I said, yes, please, I'd like to talk to him. So a conversation started up with this guy. I sent him all the CAD. I sent him all the files that I'd got. We started having Skype conversations. He had 2 digital pianos. He learned to play piano when he was a child. His daughter was having piano lessons. And he basically liked the product. He liked the snake. He thought it was a cheeky idea. And I didn't feel, talking to this man, that there was a continuous process of him trying to turn it into something more rigid and change it into something that was easier to build. He did make it easier to build, but not by pressing down on the features that it offered, but he actually wanted to extend it. He wanted to make it more fun. He wanted to make it look more playful. So this was amazing. And I honestly don't think I'd be making these videos. I don't think I'd be having these discussions. I don't think the project I'd have tried to make it survive. I'd have probably gone around, found different manufacturers for different parts, tried to somehow put something together. But no, having met this person meant that I was always available to discuss things, and I enjoy discussing things to do with the actual product, the actual physical product, the manufacture of the physical product. But I've been also enormously freed up to actually concentrate on other aspects of building the software, building the app, and starting to build the business. So that's it for this chapter. I think, yes, the product's had a really very, very lucky escape. And in the next chapter, I think what I'll do, because I left it fairly dangling what was happening with the electronics hardware and the firmware, so I think I'll pick up that strand of the story again. Okay, very good. Thanks for watching. See you next time.